Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Breakout Session 1, Sustainable Finance and Green Investment. I am Charlie. It is my honor to be the MC of the conference. Today, we are privileged to have Dr. William Yu, CEO, World Green Organization, to chair the session. We are also delighted to welcome 4 panelists. They are Mr. Neil Mascarenhas, Asia Lead, Sustainable Investing and Innovation, Goldman Sachs Asset Management, Dr. Angus Yip, Founding Chairman, International Chamber of Sustainable Development, Mr. Ken Chiu, Head of Carbon and ESG Products, Hong Kong Exchange and Clearing Limited, and Mr. Alpha Chia, Manager, Risk Advisory Services, BDO Limited. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. Let us pass the time to Dr. Yu. Dr. Yu, please.
Thank you. My great pleasure to be here to moderate this section. Thanks a lot for the support from all these distinguished guest speakers. We have around an hour to go. So to get started, I think we can start to introduce ourselves a bit to let audience know more about you. And maybe I start first, a very brief introduction of myself. And apart from being the founder of World Green Organization, which was founded in 2012, we focus on sustainability and climate action. We also, organize ESG initiative related conference. Actually, the same in the late October in collaboration with United Nations, UNESCO, and also Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Apart from all this, we also have different types of green initiatives. Say, for example, we have some plastic recycling, the PET used beverage bottles collection program. Up to now, we cooperate with some beverage brand to collect more than 6 million used bottle for recycling. And apart from that, tree plantings, several thousands along the last few years. We also want to promote a ESG initiative to introduce some best practice. So one program we established for almost 10 years is Green Office Award Labeling Scheme. Now we have over 400 participated offices, including Airport Authority, KPMG, Citibank, Zhou Dai Fuk, Shiseido, Octopus Card, all this company. So to introduce best practice, to engage their staff, to do energy, water, and paper saving, and hence reducing carbon and waste. So that's part of the snapshot of our work. I personally involved in carbon trading. I'm a certified carbon trader, and also providing advisory to corporations to lay down their carbon reduction roadmap, the carbon neutrality pathway, as well as some ESG best practice. Okay, too much for me. Maybe I hand over to maybe Ken from Hong Kong Stock Exchange.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Very delighted to have the chance to meet all of you here and have a chance to share a bit more on carbon market later
maybe
on.
Introduce
about
yourself.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
To start with, I'm working in EX for a couple of years, 5 years. It's not short, but not long. I am heading the carbon market for Hong Kong. So last year, probably some of you might be aware that in Hong Kong we have launched the voluntary carbon market with a choice or without choice, right? And I think this is one of the very key initiatives from whether it's a financial sector or an environmental sector trying to do something to combat against climate change. So it's one of the key initiatives that we have been working on. Associated with the carbon market development, we also launched a council called International Carbon Market Council, where we have 6 corporates and 6 financial institutions working around with that. So all in all, I mean, in the past a good period of time that I've been focusing on carbon. Just a bit about myself. Prior to carbon, I have a very funny background. So my background is I've been working almost all entire career in global markets as a quant guy. I study computer science, maths, actuarial science. So I pass on to William. And I work very closely with William in different occasions, including
my
talks and
PhD is on energy economics.
That's how I understand. William is very, very knowledgeable in this area. I'm very happy to meet all of you here today and really looking forward to discuss and share. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Maybe hand over to Neil.
Yeah. Just a brief on what I do. So I'm Neil Mascarenhas. I'm the Asia lead for the Sustainable Investing and Innovation Platform at Goldman Sachs, based in Hong Kong and Singapore. The Sustainable Investing and Innovation Platform at Goldman Sachs Asset Management was set up to further our sustainability ambition, thinking, and frameworks, both internally within the firm as well as with our clients.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Maybe hand over to Alpha.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. It's great to be invited for the panel discussion. I'm Alpha, and I study environmental science, and I started my early career related to environmental aspect. But however, every year my boss was asking me how should I reduce the expenditure from using on environmental facilities, etc. And then years later, I come up with my mind that I should work something with true financial return, which is ESG. Then I have a chance to have a touch on green finance too, and I was the lead assessor in reviewing the ESG and green finance report. And now my role is in BDO as a ESG team manager. And my role is to help the clients implement their ESG strategies. Because I have worked in the rating agencies before, so I understand how they should do or how they should write in order to get a high rating. But indeed, I hope that I can help them to promote the environmental awareness from the heart of the business itself, rather than just decorating the report. And yes, this is my summary.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Alpha. Okay, and Dr. Yip, Angus.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Angus. Actually, I was corporate bankers and asset managers for more than 30 years. I started my career early 1980. Yeah, it should be 98, yes. No, 1990, okay? And then after many years of my work in finance, banking and finance field, about 10 years ago, I decided to explore a new way of living. So I started to change my career by studying something new. So at that time, 10 years ago, I was lucky enough to be admitted to Cambridge University and completed my master's degree in sustainability leadership at Cambridge. And then afterwards, 3 years ago, I founded my own NGO. And last year, we set up a branch in the UK because we want to leverage the UK resources in ESG, because I think the region, Europe is more advanced than in Asia. So we want to leverage the resources there to benefit our members here. So ICSD, International Chamber of Sustainable Finance, Sustainable Development, mainly promote ESG through education. So later on, I will introduce something very relevant to banking and finance in the education field, how to nurture future talent in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, so after knowing about your panelists, I think now I have a questions for each one to give you some background of the market they are working in. I think that will help you to equip you about what's going on in the market. So maybe the first question will go to Neil first. Yeah, because today we are talking about green finance. Maybe you can help to describe the concept of green finance and also how asset management, your expertise, is changing to support the sustainable investment outcome. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, so green finance broadly are investments made in sustainable activities with an environmental objective, right? The intention here is to create impact as well as to support the sustainable development goals. It's a huge market, right? 35 trillion. I mean, I don't know if you all have heard trillions that much before, but 35 trillion is the market. And it is spread right across the entire private sector, public sector, multilateral institutions, all investing through innovative financial instruments such as green and sustainability bonds and loans, green and climate-related insurance, carbon credits, now even biodiversity credits, and other such instruments. So even if I can give you an example from our own institution, within the public investing side, we actually have one of the largest green bond funds in the world at over 10 billion. And firm-wide, purely on green finance alone, we've invested over the last, from 2019 to 2022, nearly $210 billion simply in green finance, right? And to build this ecosystem, you need supportive policy, which you've seen with the China 1+N policy and with the US IRA, right? You need regulators to be able to direct capital, which you've seen with the EU taxonomy and SFDR, as well as you need the environment of stakeholder institutions, like the UN, like the SDSN, and even the various COPs, that's the Conference of Parties which have happened, which bring everybody together to achieve this. From the asset management side, how asset managers are going about it is that sustainable investing is now moving beyond ESG investing. And we are also taking into account some of the larger macro socio-economic issues the world is facing today, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, the just transition, modern slavery, and a whole bunch of other topics. We assess the risks and opportunities of each and see what sort of positive outcome we can derive from these areas. Even with our portfolio companies, we are starting to engage with them much more, understanding both their positive and negative impacts, how they are future-proofing their businesses against issues like the carbon border adjustment mechanism in the EU, which is going to come out soon. And in doing that, we help them be more competitive, as well as be able to get a better valuation in the market, right? Within the firm, how we look at sustainable investing is an investment view based on two pillars of the climate transition and inclusive growth. Inclusive growth would include education, healthcare, and other such areas. So Goldman Sachs has committed close to $750 billion over the next decade to these two pillars. And so far, we've already invested close to 50% of that amount, $425 billion in these areas. And the reason for the underlying reasons which we saw for these to support these two pillars, the first one was changing consumer preferences, from both the corporate side as well as consumers. The second was improving economics, where we saw the price of clean solutions coming down, leading to increased adoption. And finally, increased physical impacts from both climate change and other social factors. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, very detailed. At least I start to get the basic idea about asset management, what's going on in this emerging green finance market. So Neil mentioned about the carbon credits. Is carbon credit an asset class? What does the carbon market like? I mean, in Hong Kong, how does it compare to China, US, and the EU ETS? Maybe Ken, you can share a bit about this.
Sure. It's it's a question, it's quite interesting question, because funny though that Hong Kong EX launched the Core Climate. Sounds like a financial initiative. And turn out after I work out this market, it's totally not true finance at the end of the day. But going back to basic, in terms of carbon, there are a couple of things that we can distinguish. The first mechanism, usually, before I start, have you guys involved in carbon market before? No?
Do you
Anyone
understand
of you?
what is carbon
Okay,
credit?
then I start from a very simple way to explain what it is. Carbon market, the first type is, we call it mandatory carbon market. Sounds a very fancy, sexy word. It's nothing more complicated than very simple administrative measure. I give you quota, right? I give you quota. I'm assuming all of us sitting here are high polluter, right? Coal-fired power plant, I don't know, steel mills, cement manufacturing company, in order to curb the emission, because we have a 30-60 dual goal in China, 2050 for Hong Kong and many of the other jurisdictions. We have a target how much emission we can make. There's an accounting, right? How much we can emit. So we need to reduce that part, and how much we need to absorb, remove, or via other means. So one thing that is very important is for high polluters to reduce the emission. So what's the best way? Going back to something that we've been doing 3 decades ago, quota trading, right? Hong Kong used to be an import-export, right, with quota. So nothing more complicated than, a compliance market is nothing more complicated than quota. So each of the emitter will be assigned a quota, say 1 million tons. So within that quota, you can emit, like I keep burn the coal, generate electricity. As long as within 1 million tons, I'm good, so I'm complied, right? So this is the compliance, the tools we call the allowance, right, the quota. But why there is a market is, when I have a shortfall, Neil has a surplus, I can buy from him. There we come, the quota trading is the market, right? So this is a very basic and oversimplified way to understand the compliance market. But this is indeed the very useful tools for administrative entities to manage the emission. In Hong Kong, do we have it? No, because in Hong Kong it's too small. If falling within this very strict definition, if we should have one in Hong Kong, then only a couple of companies should fall within this, like China Light and Power, Hong Kong Electrics, or Tang Gas, or some transportation company. Where else do we have the compliance market? In China, we have a national one, and then we have 8 professional one. In other jurisdictions like Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and they have their own scheme running. So I think just a very brief context about compliance market is quota and trading, right? That's one. Second one, quite equivalent, is called carbon tax. Have you heard about it? Do you know you guys pay carbon tax already? Your plastic bag. It's a carbon tax equivalent. 1 honky or 2 each, right? But do we have essentially a tax directly linked to the emission? No, we don't have that in Hong Kong, right? Where else have this kind of arrangement? For example, Singapore. Singapore refinery. So those refinery companies will charge against the emission per ton for a price, right? If I remember correctly, they're charging at around 18 US or 25 Sing dollar per ton, some around this year or next, right? So you can know that because you pollute the air, the government will need a lot of measures, right, to plant more trees, trying to do a industry conversion, so that this company can continue to make the environment more sustainable. So the second type of tools that we have is carbon tax. I would still call it a market way to do so. The third one is the voluntary. That's where we come like core climate. So what is voluntary? So this is on the flip side of the compliance market. Very simple. We are trying to divert financial resources, that is money, to somewhere that deemed necessary to continue some of the project, to sustain the project. The project where we call it have the additionality, meaning if they do not receive this kind of subsidy or money, the project will dead. But the project should be able to generate the environmental impact. Very simple, right? Plant the trees, right? I don't think all of us here will suddenly go to Inner Mongolia to plant the trees to curb again the desert and expansion, right? But this kind of project will have a very important environmental attribute and impact. And often, this kind of project, at least from a financial perspective, may not be able to sustain on its own. So that's why we need some tools to keep this project going. There we come voluntary carbon market, because eligible project, through some of the scientific method, like driving, right? Each of, like planting trees will associate to certain, we call methodology. Methodology is no more than some way to quantify what is the carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere. And then you got certified the certificate, that is the carbon offset or credit, like what William mentioned. And this is tradable. It is tradable per se, and that's why there is a market. So in Hong Kong, we have a voluntary market because we don't have compliance, we don't have tax, so that's why we have a voluntary carbon market in Hong Kong. In China, we have one called CCER. Have you heard about that? That is the China Emission Reduction Program. They're going to resume, if I'm not wrong, this year for a good reason. I try to provide a linkage between compliance market in China and voluntary carbon market in China. So in China, there is a linkage called 5%. What does that mean? So if I'm a compliance company, like coal-fired power plant, I burn coal like no tomorrow after COVID because I want to generate electricity to power the economy. I run into surplus. Say I emit 1.05 million tons at the end of the cycle. What I can do is either I buy from Neil, as I mentioned, but usually in this situation, he will run into shortage as well, because everyone tries to burn more coal and try to generate electricity. What can I do? I can go to the CCER market, which is a voluntary carbon offset market. I buy up to 5% of my allowance, say, in this case, 0.05 million tons to make up my shortfall. So that in this, some of the jurisdiction has a linkage between compliance market and the voluntary. One additional point before I pass it back to William, is there a linkage between carbon tax and voluntary carbon market? Yes, in Singapore there is one. The high emitters can buy carbon offset. They don't have a CCR scheme, but in the international scheme like VERA or Gold Standard, some of the eligible projects are recognized by the government. If I'm an oil refinery, I need to pay the tax by cash, or I buy carbon offset as like tax deductible instrument, like your charity receipt to go against your carbon tax. I just try to give a very oversimplified picture how these market operate. Final point, sorry.
Yeah,
William.
wonderful.
Scaling, I mean, it's very important. The market is still very small. If we talk about 2023, the allowance market is around 100 billion in US in total. Give you an example, for Hong Kong, EX daily trading volume is around 10 billion Hong Kong already. So if you compare to this slide, it's still very, very small. And then voluntary market is around less than 5% or less of the compliance market. So everything will depend on the achievement of 2030 and 60. We expect to take off, and we can discuss more later on. William, sorry.
People always ask me whether carbon credit will like Bitcoin, continue to search. Okay, tell you later. Okay, apart from carbon credit, Neil also mentioned about green bonds, green loans, all this kind of green financial instrument. So you are expert in this area. Let us know about the basic concept about all these instruments.
Thank you, Dr. William Yip here. I'm definitely not an expert yet, but yeah, I faced quite a few cases in my previous experience. And actually, there are many financial instruments related to green, for example, green loan, sustainability linked loan. And according to those incentive schemes from those major banks in Hong Kong, basically all companies can apply a green loan. But they have to get the report certified from a qualified assessment authority, and they have to pass the credit rating as well. And for green loan, it must come with a project, for example, a solar panel project, or an update on the manufacturing machine of the factories itself. And the use of process must be solely be put on the project itself only, no matter the staff or the machinery or the daily expense, it should be in that project only. And the pre-issuance report is suggested to be provided aligning with the international or regional standards. The most commonly used one is the Green Loan Principles from the Loan Market Association. And yes, and after all these, and with the report reviewed by the external reviewer, the loan is considered success, and the facility letter can be signed from both the parties. And for sustainability-linked loan, they are company-based instead of project-based. For example, you have to set up some KPIs related to your own company. Those KPIs must be core and relevant. For example, if I'm a financial institution, wastewater reduction can be a gimmick, but is it the most core and material to your company profile? I guess the deposit, how you treat the deposit should be the major concern instead of the wastewater. But if you are some industries like the food and beverage, and then you can focus on the reduction on the water consumption or electricity consumption, and you set the KPIs. For example, for the first year, you try to reduce 2%, the second year reduce 4%, third year reduce 6%, and after you achieve these for every year, then the incentive will come. So there will be a percentage discount provided from the bank with adjustment according to the size of your loan. Maybe like a 0.0% interest rate for you to reduce what you have to pay back. And once again, the report has to align with the international principles. In this case, it will be the sustainability-linked loan principles. And one notice is that every year the principle is getting updated. But the word is, we have to judge it case by case very specifically, because they are using words like ambitious, they're using words like based on your base performance, base 3 years performance, and try to set a higher target or record for yourself to achieve. But we can see that from the COVID pandemic earlier, the business are very affected from it. So the business or the revenue that we counted as the base is not really the base. So we have to consider these and take those into account as well. And for some green projects, those are very controversial. Like so for they're replacing the fuel using machine, they're using the lithium battery machine. Yes, they are trying to use electricity, but they will create more chemical waste from the lithium battery itself. So you have to understand their waste disposal planning, or do they have something like an environmental impact assessment before, and how they can make sure the environmental benefits comes before the environmental adverse effect comes. Yeah, so it's like a balance in between, and we have to look at the media every single day, look at what the update is, and to judge every case by case. And that's what my experience told me, to be careful on each case. Yes. So
solving one problem but create another. Okay. Kind of unintended consequence. Okay, we talk a lot about instrument, about market. Now we shift the focus to talk about knowledge and human. Okay. Yeah. So Angus, you have developed a university course here at the Chinese University. So what is it about? Who are your target students?
Yes, thank you. So I think all of you heard about our specialists talking different knowledge. Some may be very new to you, like carbon credit and also the SLL. So the first step we would like to participate in the sustainable finance, I think, is to equip ourselves. So I would like to use this PowerPoint, so only me have the PowerPoint, so I think it's more easier for me to talk. I feel more secured. Now, why I chose this program? Because we have several programs in collaboration with different educational institutions. Why I chose this one to talk today? Because it's collaboration with Chinese university. Okay, this is one of the main reasons. And second is related, directly relevant to banking and finance, is relevant to our topic today. So this program actually is not myself to develop. It's developed by a group of scholars around the world. We not only have the program, we also have the certification. It's a certified ESG planner. It's a trademark qualification. You can use it after your name, in your CV, in your LinkedIn. So up to now, I would like to tell you, in Hong Kong only, more than, I think, near 2,000 adults already studied our program, and more than 1,400 of them joined our association, and they were certified as a certified ESG planner. So this is quite encouraging that in Hong Kong, many people try to start from learning something new before they really considering entering in sustainable finance. So, and this program has another unique characteristic in the market, because 3 years ago, we put this program on the United Nations knowledge platform, and we got the registration number directly from the UN. So you could see from the right-hand corner, top right-hand corner. So we showed our registration number directly given by United Nations knowledge platform, to prove that our program is well recognized, at least at the UN level. And our program is only collaborated with different educational institutions. And to cut it short, I would like to go straight to the program content. So I have to emphasize this is not a very, very professional program. This is an introductory level, so it's suitable for all beginners. So we use a very signature, unique methodology. It's called SIPPER methodology. It's a 5-step methodology to tackle the real-world ESG issue, and it is jointly developed by our international scholar. And we put the necessary skill set and tools in the 5 typical steps for risk management. For example, the first step is to identify ESG challenges. And the second step, we use SASB, materiality finders, stakeholder mapping to evaluate the ESG issue you identified, ESG challenge you identified, whether they are material or not. And then we have several different international tools for planning, like ISO, like different standards, international standards for planning, how to solve the problem by using the international standards. And then take action, implementation, and the review. So our program is revolving these 5 steps. So let's go to the module. We have 5 modules. The first one is about the background of ESG in banking and finance. The second one is about ESG integration and value drivers, because we are talking ESG. It's not only to save paper, save electricity. This is only the first step. The second step, you have to create long-term value for corporate, okay? How to create value? According to the modern finance, you have to increase the cash flow in the future of this company. You use discount cash flow method to determine the value of the company. So how do you use ESG skill set to create value? That means to increase cash inflows or reduce cash outflows in the future. So this is a business case for you to persuade your senior or your boss to give you budget to practice ESG in your organization. Otherwise, you just say, oh, yes, yeah, good thing. Okay, for many seniors or bosses, they may not be quite convinced in this way. Oh, this is long-term benefits, so this is not tangible, right? So you have to put it in a tangible way, okay? So long-term value creation is important. And the third module is about the sustainability reporting and the credit assessment, especially, for example, in the ESG report, you may see the turnover rate of a company. You may see the concentration risk of the supply chain of this company, and then it helps you to more accurately assess the credibility of the company. And then the fourth module is about SIPR methodology and sustainable investment, responsible investment, such investment stuff. And the final module, module 5, is about lending. So the first part of the fifth module, the last module, is about the macro view. We will teach about TCFD, TNFD, S1, S2, ISSB, S1, S2, such new standards for reporting. And then we will go into the assessment criteria adopted by major banks in the world. So these are all the content of our program. You guess how many hours? 15 hours only, and it can be done totally online. Okay? It can be done totally online. And then the assessment method is not an examination. It's a case study. You have to use a real case or a hypothetical case. It should be accompanied. And how to use the 5-step methodology, okay, SIPR methodology, to apply to solve the ESG problems of this organization. So this is our program. And last but not least, you study our program. Now, this is not advertisement. You can get a government reimbursement, 80% to 100% of the tuition fee you get back from the government, because our program is already included in the latest capacity building scheme. It was announced last September. And what else? And then you can get the exemption from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, because Hong Kong Monetary Authority, they, I think 2 months ago, they announced that there is a new ECF, Enhanced Competency Framework for GSF, Green and Sustainable Finance. So if you're working in a bank, especially in the Department of Green Financing, you may need to take the examination. But if you take this course, you will get 2-module exemption. For the role 1, this is role 1. If you are doing the frontline relationship manager, and you just need to take 2 modules. So it means that if you're doing this role and you take this program, it's totally exempted. So this is what our education program is, and then I hope you understand more about that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
So if you want to register, approach Dr. Yip later, okay? Okay, so now we have all this background information and knowledge. Maybe we move on to the real-world situation about the current challenging issues we are facing. Maybe I will start to from the policy perspective, and then down to the corporate level, and also in the regional levels, okay? Maybe Neil, I want to discuss with you. We heard about the anti-ESG movement, okay, anti-ESG movement in the US. So some said it's more of the political stand rather than really relating to financial concerns. So, for example, the largest asset management, BlackRock, now they use responsible investing instead of ESG investing. Okay, you know, the fight continues. And as an asset manager, do you see the conditions for continued capital flow to ESG projects? I think that's the real question we want to ask. What will you comment on the investment opportunities in sustainable investment?
I think most of the backlash which happened on ESG in the US was as a result of the binary nature of the messaging which was coming out, that is green, non-green. excluded and not excluded, rather than an analysis of the ESG factors within the investment process and the real value it brought to investors, right? And the ESG industry has evolved since. It's moving away from simply blind exclusions to thresholds and inclusion, along with engagement strategies, where we work with companies directly and try to work with them to improve their behavior as well as achieve positive outcomes. Coming back again to the US example, it's also important to separate the noise from what's really happening on the ground, right? Currently, 22% of US energy comes from renewables. And the state of Texas, which actually created the most noise around anti-ESG, for them, the percentage is 25% of their energy comes from renewable sources, right? And they even contribute the highest percentage of wind energy to the whole of the US. So a lot of this noise you hear is basically trumped by the sort of opportunity that is out there, right? So in other words, opportunity has trumped the politics which you see. If I'm to quickly talk about 3 different areas where I can see major ESG flows and ESG capital moving into, the first would be policy-led flows. The second would be the concept of tipping points. And the third would be green capex. So regulation and policy have really been fast-moving. It initially started off with China and Europe, and now the US and Asia. Last year in 2022, the sort of policy and the regulatory environment, you saw almost 1.1 trillion go into climate transition alone, of which China was really half of the investment, at slightly over 50%, and the US closer to 13%. That is about 146 billion. And most of this money went into the climate transition and electric renewables and electric transportation, right? When you look at the IRA in the US, that's a significant policy which we believe will really spur clean tech and also spur a manufacturing renaissance in the US. If I'm to look at if I can give you a few examples, when you look at the wind sector, ever since the IRA was announced, the land wind sector saw almost 11 announcements of either factories being reopened or new factories coming up. You saw a 60% increase in forecasts of land-based wind from like 11 gigawatts to almost 18 gigawatts, as well as with the advanced manufacturing tax credits. You saw the price of blades coming down by about 27%, and the price of the steel towers coming down by about 18%. The whole idea of the IRA was to really bring down the cost curves of many of these technologies and make clean technologies profitable at scale. Another example is SK and Ford's joint venture in battery manufacturing. You're seeing a host of companies which are non-US move to the US to set up facilities. And they're being supported by the loan program office, which gave, for example, SK and Ford almost $9.2 billion to set up the factory. Okay, so there's a huge capital draw coming in that direction. The second is tipping points. With such manufacturing at scale, and you saw this in China over the last 10 years, what it's really done is it's brought down the cost of clean technologies nearly 60 to 80%, that is in batteries, in solar, in wind. And the falling cost of these technologies has actually led to increased adoption, in some cases exponential adoption. And when you have this sort of exponential adoption and the crossing of that tipping point, you see innovations start to scale. And this really brings a lot of investment opportunities in these clean technologies. Okay? And the third point I'd like to talk about is that earlier binary thinking which I mentioned of green, not green, has now started to take a more constructive approach of moving from brown to green, or in other words, the transition. So earlier transition was not as accepted, but now it's starting to get slowly accepted and capital is starting to flow. If you look at the US, right, in many of the funds, you're really not seeing that much growth, but climate transition funds over 18 months till June this year, grew by almost 304% and have touched almost 9 billion, which shows that there is a lot of interest in that particular area. And this brings me to a very interesting concept of green capex. Right, so our GS Sustain team, which is our research outfit at Goldman, they've done a lot of research on this topic, and they found that companies which are in those sectors which are not widely invested in, right, because of concerns of brown, like utilities, aviation, metals, and mining, as they start to come up with decarbonization plans, they start to disclose and have credible transition strategies. There's a lot of interest that builds in these companies, and you start seeing capital flow there. And market sentiment starts to shift in their favor. And when you look at the manufacturing bases in the whole of Asia, whether it's China, whether it's ASEAN, as new disclosures come out, as the disclosure standards like ISSB and TNFD start to get more institutionalized, and these companies start to follow it, there will be a whole wave of capital that will start coming into these companies, right? So we believe that this green capex theme is a secular growth theme over the next decade, which could attract nearly 30 trillion in investments. That's 3 trillion a year over the next 10 years. Okay, so there's a lot of opportunity out there for capital to flow into ESG.
So I've determined to stay in this area in ESG. I will continue. Okay, so we heard about policy, one of the key drivers in the entire movement. When I look at the statistic, you see, we have in 2021 around 750 ESG-related policy or guideline release. But you make a guess, until 2023, how many? Going up to 880, okay? So you see the tightening requirements in place year by year for all these ESG-related guidelines. So we can see the changes in the regulatory landscape in green finance. Maybe we start to talk about the green taxonomy. Okay, we need to have this kind of definition for ourselves, for Asia, even for Hong Kong. So for Asia, we tend to have more white list or this kind of checklist approach, okay, to define what should be done, what is green. But when you look at the Western approach, they tend to rely more on the technical parameters, to measure the green performance. But do we have this kind of prerequisite, like the technical data repository in place so that we can, facilitate this kind of data comparison? So what will be the future landscape, regulatory landscape like?
Thanks, William. I think there are many types of regulations that we are talking about. I mean, can I cite some example, at least surrounding Hong Kong? It depends on how you count regulations. The first one I can immediately recall, Hong Kong EX has issued the consultation and closed on the implementation of ISSB S1 and 2, right? This is already the first one. In short, that provide a framework, an adapted one, not directly cloned one, for listed company to follow, mainly concerning disclosing for example, emission, right? Emission data. If you count, this is one of them. Second one, concerning, for example, carbon credit, right? If you go back to carbon credit, there are tons of self-regulated framework or regulation. For example, ICVCM, that provide a standard of the standard, so that when I mentioned about the voluntary carbon market, what are eligible projects, and the carbon credits are issued on the back of those projects, and what does that mean by good quality and what not. Then we have ICVCM. We have VCMI on the right-hand side of the equation when, for example, a corporate or user try to use carbon offset for various purposes. What's right and wrong? On the carbon market regulations, IOSCO has issued 2 consultation papers last year. One is for the mandatory market, one is for the voluntary market. And there are 5 already. I can name like many of them. I think the overall key to achieve all this, there are a couple of elements. The first one, as simple as company or product. If they want to obtain some sort of compliance towards a listing regime on the disclosure requirement, or from a product level that you want to assess like what is the emission of this paper, right? And then because you want to sell it to Apple, you need to comply to certain kind of requirement. You need to perform a life cycle assessment and so on. All these are relevant, but the first one is that corporate understand, have the knowledge and know-how. How do they want to do it, right? If we would try to itemize it, that's one. Second point is, even though from a corporate perspective, you know your emission, you disclose, and the next question, because you disclose to the public, say you're a listed company, you disclose your emission data. The next question from investor, like Neil, will ask you, what sort of actions you have taken in order to achieve the pathway, the net zero pathway. That's the second one. The third one is, assuming it's on the product level, you want to determine the emission, you have fairly relatively easy determined data for like scope 1 and 2. But what about scope 3, which is the upstream and downstream emission data, which is not readily available, and so on. So I think all in all, the first thing is the understanding of, does the business know what to do, right? Do they know how to react in order to either make the company or the product compliance to some sort of requirement? That's one. Second one, do they have the data or the way to track the data to achieve net zero? I was in another forum, and this morning there was there are a couple of topics which is surrounding the mind of a corporate, including internal carbon pricing, meaning, say I'm a conglomerate, there are a lot of subsidiaries, right? I want to incentivize or penalize who are good guys, are good citizens or bad citizens. So the best way is to draw a line, right? Like ALM, right? In a bank, you draw the funding line, right? What you should not borrow, you should not lend out cheaper than your funding costs and vice versa. So likewise, there is an equivalent arrangement that is being discussed for listing company to implement to understand what's going on about the price, what's the cost of emission, right, or reduction, or benefit of reduction. That's one. Second one, there are people discussing how to build internal data system to track. We have a client, which is a construction company, a Chinese one. So they have launched their own internal data management system. They try to build, for example, one of the sites by EBD that is carbon neutral, right? So in order to do so, then you need to know like your raw material, what sort of raw material you have bought. You do the welding, right? Because you build the construction, you need to weld the steel and stuff. How many bottles of methane or ethane have been used, transportation and so on. You need a very comprehensive system to track. Otherwise, the whole exercise is quite difficult because in this particular world, I mean, to achieve like what William mentioned, it's all about data, right? Data is the key. Even you go to, for example, China national market, you talk about whether a company has complied with the compliance requirement, i.e., how do you know a coal-fired power plant has not emitted more than they can? It's all about data, right? But there are tons of methodologies. Like by direct measure is different. By estimation of the power generation. So I think whether or not it is ready is quite diverse. Some of the area, like Europe, probably is more advanced. But I mean, from our day-to-day interaction, only a rare part of the community is ready, either because the local jurisdiction or the government has a very clear KPI, say, hey, you have to achieve this kind of requirement by time X, right? Otherwise, you can operate here. That's one. Second one is, because I need to stay in the game in, for example, supply chain for some multinational corporate, from a business perspective, I need to comply. Then those corporate are relatively more ready. But I guess a large portion of them, I think there are a lot of work to be done. William.
Thank you very much. Ken mentioned about the carbon neutrality, all these kind of commitment. So based on your observation, now we move from the policy perspective to corporate. Do you see there is increasing commitment on, driving net zero or carbon neutral among those listed companies? What are the major hurdles?
Yes, sure. Many companies are mentioning the 2050 carbon neutrality in their ESG report as per what our government is driving to. But most of the reports that I've seen is mentioning the long-term goals only without the mid-term or the short-term goal. So I think this will be the very first hurdle. The first hurdle is they have to design a pathway how to achieve those. So if they are generating lots of emissions or pollutants right now, how can they achieve a zero at the end of the day? So basically, are they trying to chop it off evenly? For example, to reduce 30% until what they are running for. Are they doing it 10% every 10 years or every 3 years? It requires them a certain amount of technology knowledge in that area. That's why we consultant exists in the market. And the second thing is the resource allocation. So implementing a carbon neutrality plan requires significant financial and human resources before you get the financial returns. So you have to allocate sufficient budget and personnel to drive the necessary change. But it will be a barrier especially for the SMEs. They do not have enough budget for these ESG fancy things in their mind. So when we are talking to them, we are trying to tell them, it's a very basic need. It's related to your KPI. And once you have set it, you will get the financial return, but generally and gradually. And the third thing is the technological solutions. Adopting the appropriate technologies is essential to reduce the carbon emissions. Most of the Scope 1 emissions from our clients are factory-based, so they have to find the correct machine in order to reduce the emissions. What their main business is. And the fourth is the most difficult thing right now, I guess, is some of the franchising company, they have extensive supply chains. So if they have to address decarbonization or carbon neutrality, they have to get the emissions down the value chain or up their value chain. So they have to collaborate with the suppliers, which is like very impossible for them to do it right now. And I think these are the hurdles.
Scope-free. That's scope-free data mentioned by Ken as well. Yep. Okay, I'm aware of the time, so can we give the time to the floor? Maybe some of you can raise questions. Anyone? Yes, please. Microphone.
Okay, thank you for your insightful experience. I'm Chon Bunnak from SDS in Thailand and Faculty of Economics, Thammasat University. So you talk a lot about all the financial mechanisms, but I wonder, do you have any suggestion about how can we expand the sustainable finance and green investment to the micro, small, and medium enterprises? Like in Thailand, the cost of comply to the standard and all the reporting is very high, and that can be like the barrier to entry for the MSME. Do you have best practices or experiences to suggest to like Thailand, for example? Because MSME involves a lot of like labors, and they play an important role in the economy. If we can incentivize them to be on board on the green approach, that would take a lot of impact.
MSME, right? Maybe I ask Angus to give some response and then
Because
Neil.
I think this is a good question. In Hong Kong, HSBC, I think more than 3 years ago, they launched a sustainable finance scheme, especially for SME, to support them to purchase low carbon equipment. So I think they are collaborating with a third party verifier, BEC, Business Environmental Council, to verify the actual reduction of the emission when you adopt a new equipment. And then HSBC, the bank, will rebate some of the interest you paid. So this is quite tangible for SME. So it incentivizes them to replace existing equipments with higher technology equipments. Yeah, so this is one of the examples.
I think in Thailand there is a particular problem because I think the average life of an SME is between 3 to 5 years, right? I think in Thailand, and they're pretty much gone. And over 90% of the entire market is really SMEs there. So yeah, there has to be some sort of a grant or some sort of an amount given by the government to be able to do the reporting. Singapore is doing this currently with SMEs, right? You're getting a grant, you're getting a payout, and you're able to do reporting. And they've also created that ecosystem with the fintechs who are able to, to link directly into reporting databases such as Greenprint, for example, and also work with the SMEs. So I think Thailand particularly needs to do this. And I think the exchange, the SET, is working on something to help the SMEs out.
Thank you. Another question from Professor.
Thank you very much. I learned a lot from your conversation. So I have a question about this, so how we can make the finance more sustainable in that sense, especially in developing countries. We're saying that, for example, for the rich guys, for example, they have a lot of money. And of course, banks are more willing to lend money to rich guys instead of to poor guys. Yeah. But poor guys, for example, when they get money, so there's a risk that they may lose money, especially when we talk about green investment. So if you do something good for the environment, you may have a lower return for your investment, especially in developing countries. Then we have in trouble. So if how we can make sure that they can be turned into green with better finance, and its finance is more sustainable, and in the end, they're not going to fall into any kind of debt trap.
Yeah, this is basically the bankability of many projects, right? So a lot of the projects aren't invested in because of either major infrastructure concerns, that there are other issues which would cause that particular project to go bad, or the duration of the project is too long. And you have some MDBs like AIIB and ADB, which are actually working on structuring such finance to be able to match the duration of the project, at least the initial capital, and so that can attract private capital in. Another very interesting concept which is being worked out currently, and Dr. Avinash Persaud from the Grantham Institute, he's come up with this. It's called the Currency Exchange Mechanism Fund. So they're looking to start it with about 100 billion. What this does is try to remove the macro premier risk from these projects. Because you may have, say, a project in the developed markets which has a return on investment of 10%, and you may have a project in one of the emerging markets which has a return of about 10% as well. But when you look at the cost, it's way higher in the emerging markets than it is in the developed markets, right? So the bankability of that project is not really there. So this particular fund would try to come in and remove that macro premier risk, which is essentially your sovereign risk, your political risk, and take care of that component, so it becomes like a currency hedged return for the investor, right? So this is something which is being worked on, and I think it's through these ways and trying to get the actual infrastructure also sorted out. For example, if it's electrification, right? You have issues with grid connectivity. So for example, Vietnam, they were doing a fantastic job on rolling out of renewables. However, the grid ran into trouble. They couldn't, attach more renewables to the grid, and finally they had to slow down. So these are some of the issues that cause these projects to fail. And by some of these financial mechanisms, they can make them more bankable.
maybe just 2 cents. On many ways, I mean, that's one common issue that face not just about climate or green financing or investment. How do we want to make some of the projects more bankable? I think one of the way is through, like, for example, securitization. Like RE is a very good example. There are many good life cases in, for example, UK or any other jurisdiction where you want to securitize some of the long-term power purchase agreement so that the cash flow of the project, rather than leaning on just bank loan, the first payment resort will be from, for example, the use of the electricity surrounding this kind of renewable energy project. So I think in that way, we'll try to avoid some of the situation that, okay, you try to lend more to wealthy, or you try to avoid lending to someone have more credit concern. Even no matter how green it is, if the credit is not that sound, and still from a commercial angle, there would be a lot of headaches. But how do we want to make the project bankable is a common topic. One is about securitization. Second is mitigate by, for example, insurance contracts. It's a very common way of doing so. Just 2 cents on that.
So I eventually realized, green loan that I can, make it happen is not because of green, because you need to get through all this credit analysis, risk kind of analysis. Otherwise, you still, even it's a green project, you won't get through. And another one is this kind of public-private partnership, the bank finance approach.
Sorry, one more point to make. So Singapore is working a lot on blended finance, right? Where you're getting capital from multi-development banks, you're getting philanthropic capital and other sources of capital, blending them together and being able to reduce the cost of investment as well. So I think Singapore is doing a lot of work on this area too.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much for this really inspiring talk and chats. So Ken has actually mentioned the voluntary carbon market, and as a climate scientist myself, I often wonder how well regulated and monitored actually this voluntary carbon market is. In particular, what has been done in the public and business sectors to make sure that the carbon offsets are really offsetting the carbon that they are intended to offset. Yeah, because when we as scientists look at different scientific research, they can often be saying, oh, the trees that you plant there are not really taking up the carbon because of wildfires or insect infestation and so on and so forth. So what has been done in this particular market or by the public sector to make sure this is really delivering what people think they are?
Thank you, Professor Tai. I think the question has a lot of folds. Solely looking into the carbon credit issuance, I mean, it is more on the issuance side before we talk about the utilization side. I mean, we set aside. Current market, I do not think, personal view, from a carbon credit issuance perspective, I think it is not severely regulated right now, because it's mainly leaning on the self-regulated mechanism like VERA, Gold, and many other internal standards. Unlike the national scheme or the scheme that is run by some of the jurisdictions like CCR, I mean, they are not really falling within that framework neither. So I think the overall landscape from carbon credit issuance is still developing. I think one of the key things we're still eyeing on the core common principle under ICVCM, how that would impact on the overall carbon credit issuance process. Of course, in theory, I mean, I'm sure you also know that by heart. I think the key thing, not just about the labels we talk about, because they set only a few parameters. They talk about additionality, they talk about reversal up to 40 years and so on. But personally, I would be more interested to know, one is for example, whether avoidance carbon offset will continue to play a role or not, or how it should be priced. Because there are a lot of recent debates surrounding, for example, RED+ project, right? And second one is how other methodologies or any other removal tech would develop would be helpful to that. Because technically speaking, that in a stricter way to have the atmosphere, i.e. to remove the carbon dioxide from atmosphere, those kind of methodology or projects should be playing a decent role. But I think that we're still at a very early stage. And final comment on that is from a participant perspective, I did mention about IOSCO, which is the international SFC that issued the consultation paper. I think the behavior of the participant would be another angle to, if we want to impose some sort of regulation, would be another angle. Of course, we're not trying to define carbon offset would be a security, not now. Some jurisdiction, yes. Some jurisdiction define carbon offset as commodity. Regardless, I mean, what sort of behavior should be exercised or monitored in that nutshell? I think I myself would be focusing on, for example, I think it would be November, that IOSCO will have a bit more color on that. So at least we need two legs, right? Not just about the underlying, meaning like the stocks of a exchange, but also about the participant. You need both. I think we're still at the early stage of that.
Okay. Okay, it's time. Okay, one more question. Allow one more question. Last question. Yeah, yes. Lady, this time lady. Oh, okay.
I have the microphone, so can I ask the question?
Yeah, you ask a question and then two ladies. Yeah, please.
Okay. Do you think there's enough private equity going into regional infrastructure investment that supports the energy transition? I'll be interested to hear.
Yeah, that's
your views.
one of the questions I prepared, but we don't have time to go through. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, exactly the question we want to discuss. And also this lady. Yeah, together maybe we.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a student currently studying in Macau. I think there's a topic about sustainable finance and green investment in Macau. The awareness is relatively low compared to other country or even city. May I ask, how would you suggest the decision maker, like policy maker or government in Macau, in order to promote those green investment in Macau? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. Yeah, I've been thinking for that for 10 years from now, I guess. Yes. Basically, when everyone comes in their mind, when they think of investment, the first thing come up with their mind is the financial return. So no matter what, I think the very first step is it must be some compulsory things coming up. For example, the IFRS right now, they are urging us or urging the big companies in Hong Kong to disclose about the climate impacts because it's compulsory, right? And for that question earlier, I remember it's about the SMEs, right? About the SMEs, about the green finance, I guess. So I think they are going to disclose more about their carbon portfolio as well because the big companies right now need their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions for them to get the Scope 3 emissions. So this is because the big companies and the top listed companies need the data right now for their decision when they're choosing the purchaser or vendors or suppliers, etc. So when there is a need, they have to do something after it. Let me tell you a very true story that I heard before. Can I mention some brand name here? Maybe some like Tesla, right? When we sell Tesla, the first thing come in my mind is not always about environmental friendly. We talk about how fancy it is, how it helps you, how it uses electricity, how fast it is, how stable it is, everything you talk. And the last sentence you mentioned, it is environmental friendly too. Thank you, sir. And then the sales will happen. So I think basically, I studied in environmental too, don't get me wrong. So everything I'm doing right now, I am designing some ESG rating system right now. I am doing some framework reviewing right now for some big companies. But the first thing I think I have to put myself into their status. They're doing it for financial concern at the very beginning. So in order to drive environmental initiatives, something must be pushed, or something must be come from the top management or from the government inside. And then, or from the authorities or companies around that can help, like us sitting together today. But I'm not sure how many of you are listening or from home through the broadcasting, or you know, when you are speaking and you are presenting some things, one is accepting only like 60% on it. If he is telling the others my ideas, my environmental ideas, it becomes 30%, it becomes 10%. So that's what we are doing right now. We are trying to tell all the people, including my kid, I'm telling him to do what he can do right now. So by education, by the government incentives, I think we can build a better future all together. But be patient. It won't be happening in 1 year or 2 years. But think about how you compare nowadays with like 30 years ago. They do not have the sense of environmental friendly. They don't have these words in their mind. And for ESG, this term, this career is happening in 5 years or 3 years. That's the most common terms in the market. Only for a couple of years. We are no expert in this area because every time when I travel to Europe, maybe for a month, if I ignore all the news and all the updates on frameworks, then I'm lacking behind. So the AI and those specialists are much more updated than us, what we are doing. But what we can do right now is to promote the environmental sense to each other. And even, I'm not talking to my boss right now, but even during my leisure time, I will spend some time to look at different frameworks or guidelines or what environmental things is happening in every country. Try to imagine if you're using this time to read, to input during your working hours, then you have no times to write report or to generate all the outcomes. So it is all very depending on how you want to be as a person. Either you are trying to make money only, or you're making money, but at the same time, you're doing something good for the environment and for the world. That's why I come here to do the sharing, and I'm pretty proud of myself and even in front of my son.
Yeah, thank you, Alpha. To respond to the equity, the ASEAN, I've graduated to the ASEAN countries in renewable projects, to facilitate the energy transition.
Let's take that offline. Yeah. We'll talk after the session.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, regarding your question, I think the Macau government has done some sustainable and green bond issuances recently. So you can actually find the document, and you'll find all the information over there, on what their green plans are for the region, etc.
Can I just final 2 points about Macau? First of all, they have also, other than green bond, it's a super good point because the exchange has been working on the green bond listing. And Macau government has been working with a PHCER scheme. It's called Pu Hui. It's an individual carbon offset program that should be hopefully fungible with some other city. You can check it out. But one final point, I think the specialty with Macau is about the industry. It's a very surface industry focus and mono, and that is why it's all scope 1 and 2. Basically managing electricity would be there. So I think that explains a little bit why the way, the approach to deal with the environmental issue and awareness is different.
Okay, so please show your appreciation to all our very knowledgeable panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your fruitful sharing. Now, perhaps let's take a group photo first for the speakers. Thank you again, Dr. Yu, Mr. Mascarenhas, Dr. Yip, Mr. Chiu, and Mr. Chia. This marks the end of this breakout session and day 1 of the conference. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank everyone for your participation. Tomorrow, we will continue with 2 plenary sections, 6 breakout sections, and 1 keynote speech, starting with the plenary section 3, Geospatial Information and Human Health at 8:30. You can refer to the conference agenda on the conference booklet and website. For speakers who will be attending the conference dinner, our shuttle bus heading to the hotel will depart at 5:30, 5:45, and 6. Our staff will assist with your boarding. See you all tomorrow. Thank you again, and enjoy your evening. Thank you.